Welcome back to my hardy hibiscus extravaganza. In today's video, I'm going to share some garden tricks I use to get 5 times more flowers on my hardy hibiscus and on my other perennial plants so that you can take your garden from, oh, that's cute, to, wow, how did you do that? No gimmicks, just some tried and true methods to make your plants explode with blooms. Let's dig in. So these are my hardy hibiscus that I started with you from seed the end of February or in early March of this year. And as you can see, they are growing phenomenally and soon they're going to be blooming. And I want to make sure that I have all the blooms, not just 1 or 2 per plant, but as many as I possibly can. So today I'm going to share some tricks with you so that you can get your perennials blooming beautifully as well. First on our list of tips and tricks is cutting back. It may seem counterintuitive, but by cutting back your seedlings, you actually force them to branch out more. Now, specifically with hardy hibiscus, they get blooms on the top of each stem, but also if you have an indeterminate variety, that means that they will get blooms all along their stems as well. So the more stems you have, the more flowers you have. So you want to have as many stems as possible. I start my hardy hibiscus in seed trays of 40 cells. And when they get to be a little bit smaller than this, I up pot them into these 2-inch pots. And about a week later, I do my first pinch. In order to do that, I follow the stem down and with a clean pair of snips, I cut just above a leaf node. And that will encourage this plant to branch out. I let the plant sit in these 2-inch pots for another few weeks until they really start to fill out and until I start to see the roots coming out of the holes, the drainage holes on the bottom. And then I up pot them into 1-gallon pots. Now, I have over 100 of these plants. Some of them I'm going to be planting in my yard. Others I'm going to be selling through my backyard business. So if you are growing these strictly for yourself and you want to know if you need to put them in 1-gallon pots, you probably don't. Once the roots have fully filled this 2-inch container, as long as you have a good stretch of weather, you can go ahead and plant them. After I've potted up my seedlings into my 1-gallon pots, I wait about a week and then I give them a second pinch. This further encourages branching. Let's look at the difference between a pinched plant versus one that isn't. Believe it or not, when I was up potting this plant, it was very small and very weak, and I was afraid that if I pinched it back, it wouldn't survive. So I let it go, and it worked out as a nice example for this video. You can see that this plant is much taller, but it only has really 2 stems. It has this main stem, which is really big, and now it's having this stem has just grown. While this plant is bigger, it won't get nearly as many blooms because it only has 2 stems. You want to finish your pinching by about mid-June if you want to get blooms this year, because every time you pinch, it does delay the flowering just a little bit. The bigger the plant is when you pinch it though, the less it delays the flowering. But try to finish by mid-June if you want blooms this year. This plant was pinched twice and now it has 10 stems. Let me show you. You can see that my initial pinch was right here on this main stem, which then caused this stem to grow. And then later I did a second pinch, one here and the other here, which has allowed all of these other branches to come out. And as a result, this plant is really bushy and full. And once it starts to set buzz, it is going to be incredible. Now you want to finish your pinching by about mid-June so that you'll still get blooms this year. If you're watching this video in real time and you didn't pinch back your seedlings, that's okay. With this example, you can see that while I didn't pinch it back, it is still getting 1 second stem here, and it's getting a 3rd stem here. Now this plant is not going to grow as bushy or have as many flowers as the one I pinched back this year, but it will still flower. And who doesn't love a hibiscus flower, right? Now cutting back with hardy hibiscus is different than with most other perennials. Usually when you cut back a plant, it will grow 2 new stems from the point where you cut it. Hardy hibiscus don't work like that. For example, this is that Annabelle hydrangea that we woke up from a bare root plant. When it finally bloomed, and it took a while, it had one stem. So I cut the one stem, and from that, you can see that there are 2 new stems coming, plus a 3rd coming down from the soil line. With hardy hibiscus, you don't need to cut low like you would with most other plants, because you're not going to get 2 new stems from the point of the cut. When you cut back your hardy hibiscus, you want to do it just above a leaf node, but it can be only a couple of inches from the top, and you will get more stems coming from the main stem, and you will get some stems that come up from the soil line. So it's a great way to really increase the number of stems that you have on your plant, which is going to 5 times those flowers just by itself. And just another example that I have here for you is this plant. I did an initial pinch in this curved stem. Sometimes when you are growing your perennials in a seed tray or even in 2-inch pots and they're all clustered together, you can have 1 or 2 start to lean or reach to try to get to the sun, especially if the plants next to them are getting bigger than they are. I pinched this one back because you can see that it was kind of leaning, and it sent out this other shoot. But then look at this. One day when I was watering, and I left this on just so you could see it, one day when I was watering, the hose hit this stem and it broke, but as a result I didn't do a second pinch because I got these 2 new stems when this one broke. So this is a survival technique that the plants have, so that if something happens to their stem, they don't just die out, they continue to grow and flourish. And we could use that to our advantage as gardeners to get more flowers. And that brings us to tip number 2, which is deep watering. Hibiscus and most perennials really love water, especially when they're just starting out as young plants. So you want to make sure that you are deep watering. Don't just give it a sprinkle on the top. You want to really water so that you are saturating the entire root ball. So if you're growing in pots like I am, whether it's a nursery pot like this or a bigger container that you have on your deck or on your patio, you want to make sure that when you water, that you are watering so that there is water draining out the bottom through the drainage holes. When you see that, you know that you have watered well. One way that you can tell if you haven't been watering well is if you don't have a lot of leaves or stems coming from your main stems. That's one clue that you haven't been watering enough. And another thing is if you haven't been watering enough and then you have a big rainstorm or a few days of rain and all of a sudden you start to get leaves branching out from your stems, that's a sign too that you haven't been watering enough and you want to deep water. Now you want to let the top inch or 2 dry out in between waterings. You don't want your plants to be soggy. Like we say, they don't like to have their feet wet because that can cause rot. So you want to give them some time to dry out in between, and if you're having a heat wave, you probably are going to need to water every day, especially if you're growing in pots. That brings us to tip number 3, which is these plants are sun lovers. They need 6 to 8 hours of sun a day in order to get really big, bold, beautiful blooms and not get leggy. When you are growing plants in pots, they tend to dry out faster. So one tip that I have for you is I give my plants plenty of sun in the morning, from 6 in the morning until 11 or 12 in the afternoon, depending on the heat. And then I put them into some shade. I have an umbrella. I just put the umbrella up. And I give them shade until about 3 o'clock, and then they get some more sun in the late afternoon and evening hours, so that they are getting 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day, but they're protected from that harsh afternoon sun, which could cause them to wilt. Tip number 3 is just a little bit painful, but that is to debud. Yes, I said debud. And again, I know that that seems counterintuitive, but it serves a purpose. So you can see on this plant, this one is really nicely branched. It's got plenty of stems, and it is the first one I have that has buds on it. Do you see them? So you can see that there are only 3 buds on this plant, and I want more than 3 flowers. So one way that I can encourage more flowers on this plant, believe it or not, is to debud them. So I'm going to take off these initial buds, because that is going to encourage the plant to have stronger root growth and to set way more buds in a couple of weeks. You want to stop debudding your blooms a few weeks before your expected bloom time. So in my area, hardy hibiscus typically bloom in August. So I want to stop debudding by mid-July. So this one had some buds on it. Those are going to get cut off. I won't debud the ones that don't set buds until after July 15th because that would impact them blooming this year. Tip 4 is fertilization. When you have the early season and your plants, whether they're hardy hibiscus or other perennials, are just setting on some leafy growth, you want to use a well-balanced, slow-release fertilizer. So I use Floricon 14, 14, 14. But when I don't use that, if I'm looking for a smaller package, I just go with Garden Tone. It's a 10, 10, 10. And that's a slow release fertilizer that will feed your plants for about 3 months. So I do that in the beginning of the season when these guys are just starting out. But once your seedlings are ready to set buds, once you start to see those buds, you want to switch to a high phosphorus fertilizer to really make them explode with blooms. So in my opinion, the best one is Jack's Bloom Booster. And you can see on the package, the phosphorus is this middle number. So if you don't want to use this one, or if you're at your garden center and they don't have this one, just look for one that has a higher middle number than the first or the last number. Another really good one that I like is Tiger Bloom. Both of these products are available at most garden centers or on Amazon. I'll leave links in the description if you would like to look at them. If you've seen my other videos on hardy hibiscus, then you already know that I cross-pollinated 2 of my favorite varieties, French Vanilla and Edge of Night. And I am so excited to see what these blooms are going to look like. Just a couple of reminders, hardy hibiscus are not true to seed. So even if you did not cross-pollinate and you just took seeds from one variety, you still may get flowers that look completely different than the mother plant. Because just like you can have physical traits from ancestors and aunts and uncles and cousins, so can your plants. And if you started hardy hibiscus seeds with me in the last couple of months, I would love to know what varieties you took them from and how they're doing. So please put that in the comments below. And if you love hardy hibiscus and you haven't seen any of my videos before, I have plenty of them. I'm going to drop a link for my hardy hibiscus playlist in the description below, so be sure to check that out. Also, I am so close to hitting 10,000 subscribers, and I just want to thank all of you who watch my videos. It really makes my heart smile when you come and visit with me. So if you are watching this video and enjoying it and you haven't subscribed, please consider it. It doesn't cost anything, and I would love to have you on my journey. Thanks so much for watching today. Have a great day.